Okay, I'm really, really excited that we're doing this. There's some very tough conversations I had today, and I'm sure you had as well, of
Oh,
things that are coming up. And actually, I just want to mention this while you're getting your stuff set up there. There was actually a request, interestingly, to have people wanted to know, like, how can I be of help? And they asked if at the end of this live, when we kind of come up with some ideas, maybe um, answering some of the questions that have come up, if we could maybe put together a little PDF that can go out to people so that if they've got that neighbor next door who is a single parent, or they've got that relative, stuff like that, that there could be some like concrete suggestions. Because as we'll talk, we'll get into it, but I'm just throwing that out at you, that I may just jot down ideas if they come up. And if any of you have things that have worked for you, either if you're a single parent and you want to say something that's been helpful to you, or if any of you want to contribute ideas that you've done for other people and people have been appreciative of, there's so much good out there. And I want to make sure that we get as many ideas together, and certainly putting something like that together, I think, as a collaborative project would be a good idea. So I'm actually just going to grab a pen here.
I think it's a great idea. And, I think that
I'm grabbing a pen,
thought
but
that
we'll
was,
hear you.
yeah, sure. A thought that was going through my head as I was sort of gathering my thoughts for tonight was just that there's so much about single parents that it's sort of, people think of it as very like monolithic, and it's not. And as much as we can both from our various fields apply the experience that we have and the many, many situations that we've been involved in, at the end of the day, each situation is so different. And anybody who has had an experience of their own that they have found to be helpful and works certainly should always, always go with that. And I think I speak for myself for sure, and probably for Mrs. Cohen as well, in saying that anything that I say tonight that doesn't sort of fit in your mind with the situation that you're dealing with, definitely go with your gut on that. You probably know the situation better than I do. I'm speaking more from generalities and from general experience. I guess just as like a preface to this whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. So I think what we're going to jump right into, and first of all, if there's any background music in the middle while we do that, that's because my kids are hanging off the wall just as much as yours are. So that's for starters. Um, I think let's just introduce each other to each other's followers. I think some of our followers overlap and know each other know both of us quite well. But this is actually the first time we're doing a live together, and I figure, let's get those introductions so that you know the perspective from which we're coming to our answers. I mean, say where we're getting our
Sure.
ideas from. Go ahead.
And this is not just the first time we've done a live together. This is the first time I've done a live on Instagram. And we had
And
some
now that
major
you'll
technical
see how
difficulties getting
amazing it
here.
is, you might do it again.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. As I told you earlier today, I'm that guy about whom everybody says, "I'm sorry, sir, this has never happened before." That was me today trying to get Instagram Live working.
Okay. So, Rabbi Drandorf, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Sure. So, Daniel Drandoff, many of you know me. I'm the clinical director of My Extended Family. My Extended Family is an organization servicing children from single-parent homes. Um, Generally, the overwhelming majority of the children that we are working with are from divorced homes, although we are open to any kind of single-parent situation, whether it's Yasomim or children of a parent who's in prison, or any other kind of situation where two parents are not living together in the home for a long period of time. We've even had children that have had a parent in a long-term drug rehabilitation, things along those lines. So we're there basically to try to fill in all the gaps that we possibly can within our abilities to help the children. And oftentimes that involves helping the parents, as in right now we're in the middle of a massive campaign to help our families financially. We do this before every Sukkot and Pesach. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, we've always been able to come up with the money with our amazing, amazing sponsors and donors. But in particular now, with all the coronavirus stuff going on, people are really, really suffering. I'm sure you are getting inundated as well. And thank God. I mean, it's amazing what's going on right now in Klal Yisrael amidst all this really, really horrifying stuff. There's just so much amazing stuff going on too. And so coming back around to the point. So we service single parent children, and we have everything from weekly programming, which is really the mainstay of what we do. Everything is sort of based out of that. That's kind of like we springboard off of that. So we get to know the kids, and and we build relationships with them. We have our main branch, or not our main branch, but our original branches in Flatbush. We have branches that have opened up over the past couple of years in Crown Heights, in Muncie, in the Five Towns Rockaway community. And there's clearly a tremendous need for this kind of resource. And we do programming with the children, all kinds of fun activities. We do homework with them. We serve them a hot supper, and
And
we
the
try to
kids love
maintain
it.
contact with them. And the kids love, oh, of course they love it. Yeah. And we have some amazing sponsors also throughout all of our branches. We have local restaurants and takeout counters and even just moms who cook. So to be able to provide for the kids like really, really good suppers, good dinners, not just like every single week pizza, which is obviously the easiest and the
Which we're
cheapest.
going to talk about
But
in
it's
a second, but it is something that I just want to point out, and I think that's part of the reason that I'm comfortable getting on a live with you and everything that my extended family stands for. And I want to say this as a disclaimer, anything that we're going to talk about obviously, has a lot of different pieces to it. But I think the component that we like to talk about is the sensitivity, that if you're going to give something to another person, but you can't give it in a way that provides dignity and makes a person feel complete and whole and stuff like that, then at the end of the day, it's almost, dare I say, worthless, because it winds up making the person feel worse. It's not like, oh, it won't do harm. It will. It actually, like the do no harm piece is a big part. So I just want to point that out. In everything that I've seen and heard about from the parents that we've overlapped on and stuff like that, there's a lot of care taken to the detail that the kids don't feel like, and we'll talk about this piece also as one of the helping pieces, but this is not a, okay, Nebuch, let's provide you with something. We don't feel that way. I think about the children that we service. I believe that the kids that I know are extremely resilient. They make for the best adults in life, honestly. I think they are phenomenal, and I think you believe the same about the kids that you get to meet. So when you feel privileged to meet with kids who have faced life struggles better than many adults have, you don't just slap a meal on the table. It's got to be something that is respectful. So that, just wanted to add that.
100%. And I mean, I could go on and on about how that is our outlook, our hashkafa,
Mm-hmm.
our approach. And I
And
think
I
even
think we're
more,
going to segue to some of these points, to be fair,
no question about it.
throughout,
It's
because
very
some of the
relevant to
questions
the whole
that came
conversation.
in, right, because some of the questions that came in are going to be very relevant to this component. So
Sure.
I think it's been incredible to see also the growth um, of the organization, and I've been able to see some of the services that are provided, and it's genuinely incredible. And once a child gets involved, then they become part of the extended family, for lack of a better word, right there.
Sure.
So I'll just introduce myself to your followers. So my name is Sarivka Cohn. When I was 9, I lost my mother, and I was an only child. So it kind of was a very lonely experience. So what wound up happening was I found myself some friends. When I think I was in 5th or 6th grade when I found my first friend. And then when I was like in high school, I found a few more girls who had lost a parent. And we became kind of a little group where we would say to each other, like, was that weird? That woman also tapped you during Yisker and said, like, what are you doing here? Like all those strange experiences that nobody else got. It was a very nice little like clique that we had, for lack of a better word. And I always realized the power of peer support is a very big piece, but I never thought to do anything with it. And then a few years into my marriage, I met up with somebody, and she said, why don't you start a publication for kids who lost a parent? And I said, fine, okay. Writing was my thing. I worked for about 8 years as an editor at Bina and Hamodia, which is how some of the people here know me from. So um, I said, fine. And like a young and stupid, I went into my pantry, took out a couple of shelves, got my husband to design the magazine. And I sat there and wrote the first magazine under 6 different pen names. And this is where I think we were very similar in this, is that I refused to send it to families just because I heard they lost a parent. Like, why are you intruding into my life? When we're going to talk about that is just because people are in a vulnerable situation doesn't give people the right to now decide what happens with their life by any stretch of the imagination. So what I did was I knew like about 10 families who had lost a parent. I called those 10 families and I said, would you like to get a magazine? They were all very excited. So fine. And then what I did was actually my strategy was that I sent it at that point out to about 40, 50 Rabbanim, therapists, principals, and stuff of that sort. This was about 14 years ago. And what started with 10 families, unfortunately, is probably about 900 families right now. And it's grown to pretty much servicing anywhere in the US. We have a branch in England as well. And what we do right now is we have publications, we have hotlines, we have quarterly events, we have 2 weekends a year, one for the girls and one for the boys. And then, as you said, once kids start to join, then I always say there are the everyone programs, and then there's the individual programs of what the kid in particular needs, and similarly, just sometimes there's a family that needs help with something in particular right now that nobody else needs help with, but that's very relevant to them, right? So we try to be there as people there. Another very big piece of our program is we do a tremendous amount of therapy referrals. And the reason that started, and that's also going to be a piece of the conversation tonight, I'm looking at some of the questions, is because we felt that a lot of times kids were calling for various referrals, or we're getting a name from just about anywhere, and they were just saying, let's say I'm anxious without, and maybe they even said, my parent passed away or something of that sort, but they weren't saying the full story. And so they were getting a therapist that wasn't necessarily equipped to deal with the situation. So what we began doing was vetting. So we've been meeting and following up with therapists, and then meeting and following up with the kids to ensure that A, that they're actually going, and B, what's going on, so we can see who's doing a good job with what, and hopefully be able to be more helpful to that end. So I think we've kind of given people an idea of that we're both pretty passionate. We're both advocates for single parent homes. And I want to make a very clear distinction here that Rabbi Drandorf mentioned in the beginning. There's a lot out there about single mothers, and I was very careful to call this live for single parents. I think there is an element within society, and it's not necessarily the frum community, that has forgotten about the fact that there are many single fathers who are raising families. This is just the reality for one reason or another, whether it's because of death or divorce or other reasons, that these men are now there, and they face very unique struggles that sometimes people don't realize, whether it's that they'd like to go daven with a minyan, but they can't quite leave their kids home. Whether it's the fact that people assume that they are breadwinners and men have the financial means, when not always do they. And business doesn't always go as well as it should, or their jobs they were fired from. So I want to just broaden it and ensure that when we talk about the single parent, I just want everybody to be mindful that you may be forgetting about that neighbor who comes to your show because it's not on your side of the mechitza, or it's a guy who you don't think about. But let's try to be mindful of that when we have this conversation. So I'm going to jump into the first question that somebody said, and I think this is going to be an interesting one. She talked about the resistance. Okay, her sister-in-law is a single parent. She doesn't say the circumstances, whether there was a death or divorce. This is her husband's sister. And she said, every time I offer help and they need the help, there is no, we're fine, thanks. Should I be pushing, or should I be accepting the fact that, hey, they don't want help? So she says, on the other hand, I see that the kids really could use the help. And again, she's not specific on the kind of help, whether it's financial or emotional. And I think we're going to have to make some differentiation here. But what do you think, Rabbi Drandorf?
Well, first of all, the question itself is heartening, because it means that there are people that really, really care and really, really want to be there and are trying to. And it's just a matter of sort of navigating relationships and figuring out how to do it. And I think that one sort of overarching theme that I think both of us have sort of alluded to already, but you can't force somebody to accept help. That's, I think, just sort of like, again, an overarching theme. You can't force somebody to accept help, and that should never, certainly when we're talking about trying to do it in a bakavadik way, in a way that a person's not going to feel like a nebuch, and not going to, all those things that are so, so, so important anytime you want to help anyone. So certainly if there's a feeling of I'm chasing after you to help you, it's not going to feel good for anybody. And it should feel good, at least for the one on the receiving end, if not for the one who's giving also. I would say just a couple of thoughts that come to mind when you describe this lady and her, and you said a sister, right? Or was it
sister-in-law? I think it's her husband's sister.
So the first thing I would say, just as like as a simple Eitzah, is rather than proposing to help or posing the question of what can I do, come with some specific things that you would like to do. I think that when people are asked, "Can I help?" they're very quick to just say no because I don't need help. But if you're offering something specific, like, "Hey, let me now," okay, it's coronavirus days, so we can't necessarily help in these ways, but just as an example, if you say, "Hey, can I take the kids for a little while?" and do it in a way like, "Can I take them to the park?" You know, if you have kids that are the same age, like cousins, then offer to take them out for the afternoon. Um, if it's specific and it's direct in that way, then there's a very good chance you'll be taken up on it. And especially if it's being asked in a way that is, like I said, bekavadik and not coming off as I think you're a nebuch, or just I want to be there for you. And just one other thing that comes to mind is that it's not always necessarily just about what you're doing. It's also about being there, being with the person, and making sure that that person knows that you care for them. And it's not always about what can I do for you. It's also just about, hey, I'm here, and just talking, just shooting the breeze, and just being a friend. And if you could be a friend to somebody, then you're giving them something amazing. And I think a lot of people don't really. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I think a lot of people don't really think that way. That if I'm going to be your friend, I'm giving you something without going anything beyond there.
Right. I think there's like this piece of people sometimes feeling like I need to do something concrete, like in order for this to be, it's not so much my presence, it's about what I'm going to do, but really the presence can be incredible. I think that's so important. I actually just attended an amazing, intense 3 day grief training in LA. And there was just like this very cool insight that one of the trainers mentioned. I think it was Bretta Wasserman. She says, when you say to a griever, and this could certainly be true in any sort of single parent situation, but she said, when you say to a griever, let me know how I can help you, you have just given them another job.
Hmm.
They need to now come up with another thing for you to do. And you've just added a stress level. So it's easier for them to say, I don't need anything because frankly, I don't have brain space right now to come up with something for you to do. So that's why, to Rabbi Drandov's point, I think when you can offer something, then it's a question of like, I'm going to the grocery now. Any items you need, right? That kind of thing is much more direct and effective because it's not giving the person another job for their cluttered mind that is already overwhelmed with so many different responsibilities. So that was one piece. The other piece that I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you've seen this, but in some of the cases that I've seen the resistance, it has a lot to do with what happens after the help is offered, right? If they know that after you've given them, whether it's $500 for Yantif or after you've taken their kids for a Shabbos, this is what happens on the family chat that you're not on, that they're not on. Oh my gosh, do you know what I just did for so and so? Right? Or if this happens in the neighborhood of guys, you don't know, you see that suit the kid is wearing? I made sure I took him to the store before Yontif and I got it to him and stuff like that. If a parent senses that, I mean, let's just think about any of us, right? If I would sense that I'm taking help from somebody and then I become the talk of their community, their bungalow county or their neighborhood or their family or stuff like that, then it's like, you know what? I'll do without that suit. Thank you very much. Right? So we have to be mindful of that, is that the giving also has to be about what's the end? The end is really to do what's best for this family. And what's best for this family is whatever can be done as quietly as possible. And the other piece also that I find is that in terms of also the after effects is sometimes, do they now owe you? Do we now have a situation where if I gave you $2,000 for Yontif, you must come to me for the Suda, even if your kids don't get along with my husband?
Right? Like
Right?
there's some kind of reciprocal relationship.
Exactly. And it's so sad because sometimes people mean so well and they have so much to give, and single parents can benefit so much from that relationship and whatever it does have to offer. Don't add extra strings. Don't, because when we add the extra strings, it makes it really difficult for a person to take. So I think to that answer, you need to explore where the resistance is coming from. The other thing that I think we both probably can agree on is, we offer a host of services. I'm sure not everybody takes you up on all your services, even when you know the family can need it. And even if when it's done in a bakavadik way, and even if it will be done with no strings attached and yada, yada, yada. I experience that all the time, right? Fact of life is we can take a horse to water, we can't make it drink. There are dynamics within every family that create a reality for this single parent. And for one reason or another, they're not always in the position where they either want to be taking or can take. And you know what? This is the piece also. If you're not going to grumble about it, and if this doesn't become a thing, if you just leave that door wide open and say, okay, I get that it doesn't work for you to come to me for Yom Tov here. Just want you to know, I'm going to keep inviting you. And if you ever want to come, that's fine. And I won't ever get insulted if you say no. Chances are that at the point where this person's either ready for the help or needs the help, they will probably walk right through your door versus a lot of other doors. So that's, those were just two things that I wanted to add. Okay,
Yeah,
next question.
I would just say one other point just
Yes.
to add to that, really just taking it one step further, not much different, but that I think that a lot of the reason why people are often worried to take help is because of how they feel that's going to reflect upon them. Meaning, if I'm taking this help from you, then he or she will probably be thinking that I'm a nebuch and those thoughts are going through the mind of the person who is the potential receiver, the potential taker. And if that person knows that you're not judging their situation, you're not looking at them like, oh, you got yourself into a mess or something like that. I mean, that's a lot more, I think, something that I find on my end, working mostly with divorce, and I think you'd probably find working with Yesomim, Almanos, and that kind of thing, because there's a clear difference in terms of what some people, I think, crazy,
Perception, right.
have that perception of fault. But if you, as the one who's going to be the potential giver, can give over the feeling, and not in the moment when you're making the offer, but in general, through the relationship,
Oh, is
you
that a
can
good
give
point?
that person the feeling that, hey, I don't judge you at all for the situation you're in. I think you're great. I have no problem with the direction your life went. I just want to be here for you as best as I can, however you want me to be there. Then when it comes time for the giving, then it'll be much easier for the person to take, because they're not going to feel like, hey, he's going to look at me, she's going to look at me and think all kinds of stuff about me, because hey, we have an understanding, we have a relationship, we know each other. He knows me, she knows me. I know that she does.
Mm-hmm.
I know that she's not thinking those things. It
Mm-hmm.
can't just be in the moment that the offer is being made that you try to infuse all of those wonderful, amazing, necessary feelings and hashkafos. It has to be really an overarching thing throughout the relationship if it's going to be
Excellent,
effective.
excellent point. I want to just add one thing that just like flitted through my mind as you were saying this. In the beginning of the question, I said there's a difference between emotional and financial in terms of not managing component, right? Obviously, I want to make a disclaimer here, right? Obviously, if you're seeing something that is cause for abuse or neglect, all this goes out the window and you need to get professional advice on that. And by professional advice, I mean not the extended family that has their opinions, or not the neighbors who have their opinions. Professionals who have dealt with these types of situations, who are licensed, who are trained, will have insight to you whether this is normal or not. And I'll give you a perfect example of why that's important. Um, I just recently had a situation where somebody called me up and said, and used the word dysfunctional in a very broad term to describe the situation that was there. And I said, let's not label it. Give me the facts, right? What are you seeing? I'm not saying this situation is or isn't dysfunctional or not, but what I need to, in order to help you make that judgment call of what's going to happen next, we need to know, what are you seeing? And the person described different things that in her mind were dysfunctional. And I'm going to give you the ideas. And if this resonates with any of you of how this could be functional, you can shoot a heart up. So she was saying, dinner is never served at the same time. It's served anywhere from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Said, okay, I hear that. Um, you know, she doesn't have a set bedtime. There are bedtimes that happen from 7 to 9. Okay, range. This is the range that I'm getting. Um, she keeps a pile of clean laundry on the couch, and the kids take it and they put it in their own drawers. And I'm listening to all this and I'm saying, mom had baby number 7 in a regular 2-parent home. She had twins. We wouldn't call this situation dysfunctional, would we? We'd say mazel tov. She had a baby. She had twins. Normal. Every woman can commiserate. I don't know what's going on in your house. Coronavirus has turned my house upside down. I don't even know what the word bedtime looks like anymore. I have no idea. And trust me, my husband's a principal, and a social worker, and I've run plenty of programs. I cannot get 4 clowns into bed at a particular hour if I try, right? And nobody's judging anybody, right? Everybody's sitting there and going, normal, we're all in the same boat. Here's the reality that people need to realize. Single parents will function on a different reality. And sometimes in an effort to keep the home a happy place, a safe place, maybe they're working on rebuilding relationships with some of these children who have been through whatever horrors they've been through. They need to loosen up on certain pieces. And as I was listening to this, I didn't hear anything horrific that made my hair stand on edge that I would say dysfunctional. You know, I didn't even hear that any of the kids were saying, I hate my mother's lack of schedule. There are happy kids going dressed fine. They're going to school every day. They're coming home. They're getting food. It's not the way you would do it, right? So that's something that I think we need to also put out there. Is so important to know in terms of single parents, is that they're functioning in a different reality. Think of it like a kimpatern. Think of it like a mom during Corona. Think of it like a dad who needs to do this when his wife goes on vacation. Okay? I don't know what some of your homes would look like, Rabbi Drandorf. I'm not trying you, but there are some homes where when mom goes away for a week, lots of fun happens, right? So reality is, and none of us ever think that's dysfunctional. So what is it about the single parent home saying, you know, there's a fluidness to certain pieces? And not by any means am I saying this is true of every single parent home at all. What I'm making the point is that there's a different reality that they're operating within. And as long as they're emotionally there for their children and doing the best that they can with the tools that they have and the support systems that they have or lack of them, you know, we need to accept that their home won't look just like ours, and that if it's working within a range that's safe, it might not be your functionality, but don't label it dysfunctional.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what we're finding, for sure, what I'm finding at my extended family is that the children are not necessarily any less comfortable or safe or functional, really, despite despite some of the challenges that are inherent in their situation. Like you said, it's really a great way of looking at it. When, you know, my wife went away to Eretz Yisrael. She got in before coronavirus, Baruch Hashem, but she was away for a week. We won't talk about my house during that week. But certainly, you know, and Baruch Hashem, everybody was fine, everyone was safe, everyone was happy and healthy, and everything was great. But it certainly wasn't functioning the same way that it always did, and that's fine. And I think that when we think about not just single parent homes, but when families have different kinds of challenges, that's going to sort of dictate and determine their type of functioning, not necessarily their level of functioning, but their type of functioning, their mode of functioning. And when we kind of think about it as just different and not problematic and dysfunctional, then it certainly, you know, going back to the conversation really in terms of how it relates to what we're talking about tonight, if you're able to look at your loved one, your friend, your whoever who's a single parent, who you're wondering about how can I support him or her, when you look at him or her in the way that we're talking about now, it's going to be so much easier to be able to give and take. Definitely.
I think that's an excellent point, and I like that nuanced difference there in terms of the mode of functionality. Okay, next question here that came in, and anyone who has any questions on the live, we're going to try to allot a couple minutes for those, so feel free to shoot any questions. So this other person says that I'm trying to just make heads and tails. I thought I got it before, but now I'm in rereading it, I'm trying to just phrase it in the way that I think that what she means. Okay. I think what she's saying is that the single parent in her life, and it seems to be it's a friend, can be very needy. And anytime she sets a boundary of like, I can't help you right now, or we can't host you for this Shabbos, she's feeling that she gets a lot of resentment of like, don't you know I'm a single parent and I can't manage? And she says, I get no slack for the fact that I'm human and I can't be everything to everyone all the time.
That's a tremendous challenge. And I think that the answer that's formulating in my mind is a very tough one. And I'm not sure that you might have a different either view or a different thought about it, but My view is that when you're in a position of helping, it may be it's great when you get to feel good about it and you get to feel like, you know, things are working out exactly what you'd like them to, but sometimes it's very, very hard. And, everybody has to have their boundaries and everybody has to know where it crosses the line into the realm of abusive, where it's really, really impacting your ability to function in your life. But assuming that that's not what's happening, because I think in a lot of situations, and I definitely know what you're talking about, I think in a lot of situations, it doesn't rise to that level. It's just that the person just gets frustrated inside. Why doesn't he appreciate me? Why does she take me for granted? And if a person's able to take a step back, and again, this is very, very tough. This is not an easy thing to do at all. And I'm not suggesting that it is in any way. Please don't assume that I am. Don't think that I am. But if a person's able to recognize that, hey, I'm in a position where I can give. Thank God I'm in a position where I can give. And I have to have my boundaries, but I have to be, on the one hand, clear about those boundaries. But at the same time, I have to know that part of this loved one's burden and challenge in life is that this is how they express their frustration, and it's not you. They're not upset at you. They're not angry at you. They're frustrated about their situation, and they're taking it out on you, and that's not fair. But if you're able to sort of reframe it in your mind and not take it personally and recognize that it's coming from a different place entirely, you can still give lovingly. And if you're able to let go of that me part of it, that this is like personal, then I think that a lot of people will find that their boundaries expand and what they're able to give is far greater than they thought. And they don't reach that point of like where they're really beginning to feel resistance. They don't reach that point till a lot later. Certainly everybody has that point, and you have to know when you get to that point, when it's really affecting your functionality and your ability to be a mother, a father, a whatever, a husband, a wife. But know yourself for real. Really, really know. Am I there? Is this because I'm taking it personally? I think that that's a really, really important sort of way to think about this.
So it's very interesting. Um, my perspective on it is similar, but a little bit different. Um, I'm definitely more about the boundaries. I feel that a lot of times what happens, and maybe this is more about a death, right? There's a lot of people come in the beginning and say, always feel free to call me whenever you need anything. I'm always here for you. Listen to those keywords. Always, right? And at some point in that vulnerability, the person may be using them as a sounding board always. And the mistake in that, the onus on that, a little bit is on the giver, in the sense of we need to be careful that what we're offering is something we can truly keep up with. If you're ready to say to a single parent, you can come to us every Shabbos, then realize that what that means is there's a possibility that that might be what works for this person. And so they will most likely want to come every Shabbos if that's what works. And then when you pull back, you're really hurting that person in a tremendous way. So I try as best as I can with myself and with my staff, certainly, because we interact with the kids a lot and teens will take you very literally, take you up on it. If you say you're available 24/7, they'll try you at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? So I prefer when people give boundaried places of like, I'm always home on Thursday nights. And if you ever want to call to schmooze on a Thursday night, I'm always available while I'm cooking. I put the phone on and you can go on and talk, right? What that allows for is that it's a comfortable setting for you and you can actually fulfill that for the other person, right? I find so often we think we're being helpful by saying, oh, like I said, any of these always kind of words, right? Or any time or any of those kind of very broad words is usually what ends up leading to this sort of situation. So if there's one thing I educate families to the best of my ability, and unfortunately I've been doing it a lot this week with new deaths. So somebody said to me, I already told the family every Shabbos, every Yom Tov, they're by me. And I'm like, oh, God
Big
help me,
mistake.
because in 6 months, I'm going to hear from this person. Every Shabbos they come to me. Well, duh, did you not offer that, or did you offer that, right? So if I can educate people, it's think twice before you offer, but don't think 3 times, meaning to say, make an offer, but make a calculated offer of something you can actually do. Like I'm telling you, I have women who go to Costco every Wednesday, and they have 3, 4 families on their list that they happily call before and say, you're an easy drive from my house. I go to Costco anyway. If you need a case of tissues, I'm happy to bring it back to you, right? And some of them can afford to put it on their tab, and some of them take people's quick pays and they work it out, right? But the point is that think of something that is doable for you. And I'll give you a perfect example for myself, right? I used to have people just in general, not just necessarily from Links and Shliners Club, come to us for Shabbosim. As my kids got older and my weeks got crazier, the absolute worst thing I was doing to my family was hosting anyone for Shabbosim. So now our policy is nobody for Shabbosim, everybody for Yom Tov. It works for our family setup because Yom Tov is anyway a zoo in my house with extended family and stuff like that. So it's not a big deal if we add a few more people to the zoo. I always tell people, as long as you're welcome to join, the craziness that's here. Obviously not this Pesach, but then you're more than welcome. But I realized that Shabbosim don't work for me anymore, and that I would be resentful of it, and it wouldn't be working for my family, right? So now what did I do with those that I used to host and stuff like that? So some of them, it was a slow tapering. That's also something. You can't pull the plug from one second to the next unless, as Rabbi Drago pointed out, there's an inherently abusive situation going on. That's a whole different ballgame, right? But we're talking about normal, where you offered someone right after their divorce, or you offered someone right after a death, come to me every Friday night, right? And then it's not working anymore. So what you want to be able to do is, first of all, you want to be able to do it slowly. You don't get to just pull the plug like that, because right now, unless there's, like I said, an emergency. So you may want to say, you know what? Right now, actually, we, for us, it was a natural progression because we were painting at one point. So it was like at the point where I was able to say, we're not going to be home for 3 weeks. So we kind of, we find something like that where it allows within those couple weeks for something and say, and we'll love to have you in 2 weeks from now. What you're doing is you're slowly broadening and obviously to the best of your ability, finding alternatives to whatever it is that you've been providing for this person is key also. Not necessarily that this person knows, right? We had a situation with a different family who I knew, a neighbor of mine actually, who had been hosting, and the situation was becoming such where it was just not good for one of her children. It was just really, a child was coming and that child was really aggressive towards one of her children, and everything she had tried didn't work. And with professional guidance, this was a relationship that had to stop. And one of the things that she did was she called up 2 other neighbors and said, look, it's not working for me. It will work for you. There's nothing problematic here. Do me a favor. Can you call this person and invite them over? Because I can't do it anymore. But I want it to be that this person has another option and has that before I call. So what ended up happening was one of the neighbors called that week and said, this is horrible. You've been going to so-and-so a whole year, and I never get to see you. And the truth was that their kids were best buds. And it worked out so beautifully where it wound up segueing. So again, it can be done sensitively when there need to be boundaries. But the more boundaries you can set from the get-go, particularly if it's family, because then it gets really sticky, do so from the beginning. Because if you're in a situation where you're intertwined, you're going to have a big, big problem doing it. I think that's just...
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing more that we're kind of like both responding to different sides of the coin. And you're responding more to the before the fact, trying to figure out what to do now when I'm faced with a situation. How do I create a situation, a circumstance that I can live with that will work for me, work for my family? And I'm kind of responding more to, I guess, like the back end of it, like what happens when the person that you're giving to is just constantly upset and frustrated and just, it's never enough no matter what. And all the boundaries that you put into place, they're just, breaking through all of them, like boundaries. So, it's certainly
so somebody
definitely
sent a
set the
follow,
boundaries.
right. So somebody just sent a follow-up question privately. Thank you for DMing me, and she just didn't want her name out here. But she said it to this note that we've both been talking about. She said, is there ever a point where you want the single parent to be independent enough where they're not so dependent, or seemingly so at least, on everybody around them? And she wrote in parentheses, financially and emotionally.
my response to that is a strong, none of us are independent, not a one. And we all rely on the people around us emotionally and financially. Whatever that might mean. It might mean financially help getting a job. It definitely means emotionally relying on our spouses, relying on all kinds of people around us. And I think that for those of us that are not single parents, and I don't, Chas v'sholom, mean to, imply or assume anything about the person that's asking the question at all. I'm speaking more in generalities. But I think that for all of us, and it's true for all of us that are not single parents, it's much easier for us to think of them as being people that are in a perpetual state of need, and thinking of ourselves as being the ones that are sort of, we have the ability to function on our own independently, and now we're the givers. But in reality, all of us are taking. All of us are taking on so many levels, in so many ways, and the single parents around us are really behind the eight ball in so many ways. And I think that to support them, and certainly, as Chazal say, the more you can give a person and the ability to stand on their own 2 feet, the better. Of course, that's the greatest chesed you could do for somebody. But when it crosses the line to thinking of them as people that are needy, when in truth, I mean, again, the word needy is a hard word, because on the one hand, it's true. Technically, they need, right? But on the other hand, the word needy has a very negative connotation, and it's not a negative to be needy. You need things, right? People need stuff. They need emotional closeness, and they need all kinds of things. And if they're not getting it in a loving marriage, then they're going to need to get it somewhere else, like all of us. Healthy attachments, close attachments, love, and affection. And if they don't have an outlet to give it to somebody else and to receive it, then it's going to be very painful. And the more that we can understand that perspective to the best of our abilities as not single parents, for those of us here that are not single parents, the more we can understand it from that perspective, the more the less resentful we'll be when we're giving, and the less we're going to think of those single parents in our lives as being needy.
I think that's a beautiful perspective. Not in any way disagreeing with that. I think that there is one thing that I do want to bring, and that is that there are people who, for one reason or another, derive a certain amount of joy out of creating a dependence. And we need to be mindful that if we're giving, we actually want, the goal is for a single parent to be able to run his or her own home to whatever standards they have, be able to make decisions confidently on their own, or choose who to ask advice from when it's a complex situation. We want the single parent to be able to have the tools to function on a day-to-day level on their own. And so I think, similar to the way we answered the question before, I'm going to talk a little bit about the before. One of the reasons why boundaries are so helpful, and why, like somebody said to me, she says, they set something up in their family, and they said to their sister beforehand, this is what we're going to do for the first 6 months, right? So let's say they were helping financially. This is what we can do for 6 months. So first of all, that doesn't hurt at one point when we just pull the plug at some point and the person's like, oh, I never knew when this financial support was going to end or start, right? So let's say they say, we can afford to pay your rent for 6 months while you gather yourself and your situation and kind of come up with some plan, right? That is amazing and makes sense. A classic example of that is, there's an organization called the Victor's Helping Hand, which you may be familiar with, in the Five Towns. One of the things that they do for widows is that they'll help them during the first year. It is very clear to a person who has lost a spouse is that this is the level of support we're going to get for 12 months. So it's like reminder, when the 6-month thing is, we're like halfway through this, right? There's something very comforting about that. And there's also something about the idea of you're slowly helping the person really, because I think we can both agree is that a person feels confident when they can own their space, right? When they don't have to be 100% dependent. I agree with you 100% that I think each of us needs something from somebody else. And that's such a brilliant analogy in terms of that. I think we want it to be as normal as possible. And sometimes in the beginning, whether out of a fresh divorce or a fresh separation or a death, right? We'll see a tremendous shift where there'll be, let's say, 70% dependence and 30% independence, right? There's a tremendous need for help in the beginning on a physical and emotional and financial level with a lot of things. What we're hoping to help someone with is that there should go back to what's the normal equilibrium for a person. And let's say, we're just making this up now, that it would be that 70% of our lives we can function independently, and 30% is where we have the need for the supports and the other pieces in our lives, right? We want it to go back to that kind of level. And if for everybody else it's 70%, so even if it's 60 for the average single parent, that's fine. But I think what we have to be careful and mindful of as a community is that we don't set up single parents for disappointment when we pull out, and also for a need that if they at some point decide, okay, let's say coronavirus wasn't here this year, I want to make my own Seder. I'm done being a guest at other people's homes. And then there's suddenly this, I can't believe it. What do you think you're doing? Why are you doing this? Right? And I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard this from a lot of single parents, whether it's somebody who was an askin in the beginning or a relative or a neighbor who's like, I can't believe it. And they'll even sometimes go to the links to try to undo the decision and undermine the authority of the parent to make that decision, whether it's by involving other people to put pressure on this parent or stuff like that. We need to be very careful of that. Is the end goal is, as much as I would like to independently make a decision of where I would like to spend my Pesach, clearly I'm making the decision together with my spouse. And in this case, there isn't a spouse. She or he is the adult in the home and is going to make a decision that works for their family. And we need to respect that piece. So that's where the independent piece, I would just add that piece. And I think in terms of if there is a single parent who, you know, sometimes you'll say the 6 months, and guess what? When the 6 months are up, they're still shocked. And there'll be that piece of like, oh, I can't believe it, and you don't know, and I'm not going to manage and stuff again. And that's where sometimes the resentment piece comes in, where a person says, look, I can't. And the kind of, this was the agreement, right? And stuff like that. And in those cases, I tell people you can still be compassionate when you set that boundary, right? You can still validate. Dr. Kozlowitz, I think, is on this live. She has this line called validate the valid. And I love it because validate the valid must be really scary right now to try to figure this all out. Let's see if we can brainstorm together where else you may have the financial something, or let's talk to a financial advisor, right? You can be compassionate about it without having to deplete the resources that you don't have. But there, and like I said, you know, boundaries is my thing because I've seen the fallout, unfortunately, when they're not set properly. So I think when somebody is needy in your life in the sense that they're not accepting the fact that there may be components that need to be done independently at this point, try to be compassionate about the way that you're going to assert, not just like, I don't understand, I've done this for you, we've made up, and stuff like that. Validate the valid while still maintaining that this is what I can and can't do. You know, I'm sure you get this at my extended family sometimes when you have, let's say, $200 for a family, and the family says, well, we really need 400, and you don't have that 400. Or you don't want to create a situation where mom says, well, I begged hard enough, so I got 400, even though you got 200, right? And every organization has a board, sets boundaries, and this is what we can and can't provide, right? It's just a matter of how
Yeah,
we
I,
say
I,
it.
I think also just sort of conceptualizing the question and the way that I think about it, really, I would categorize money needs, and everything else as being like very, very, very different, fundamentally different. And I think that and it all having in mind the best interest of the person, that financial independence is the best thing for the person. Emotional depend now that the word dependence is a hard word. We don't want somebody to be emotionally dependent, but nobody can function on their own emotionally. And that's more what I was speaking to. I think that on the financial side of it, sure. I mean, you know, somebody once said to me, it could be it's a famous line somewhere, and I don't know this, but somebody told me any problem that can be solved with money is not really a problem. And I mean, that's definitely, you know, a deep thought to think about, and certainly those of
One
us that have.
second, your sound is a little funny now. I don't know if something turned off in your Bluetooth.
I'm not on Bluetooth. I took
No?
out my headphones. Is this okay? Is it better if I move closer to my phone?
One second. You were on something else before or anything changed?
No,
Oh, okay. I don't know.
same.
It's okay. It's just, it's
Okay,
a different sound.
okay. Different isn't necessarily bad.
Right.
So my point really just is that I think that financial dependence is something that is ultimately not in the best interest of the person. And the more you can give a person the ability to be independent completely, the better that person's going to feel about themselves. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. We're looking to help people. Um, and when it comes to the emotional, that's I think what I was speaking to more. And what I heard in the question was more than just the financial part of it. That some people feel like there's the emotional neediness, and to me, there's a lot of truth to that, and I don't know that the neediness is necessarily such a terrible thing. People need emotional support and help, and certainly we don't want to create dependency, and certainly not codependency, which is I think what you were speaking to, what you touched on before about people that try to drag you in and sort of like create chaos, and that's where like the codependency comes in. But to the extent that it's healthy, again, my perspective really is just to shift it and not think of it as a dysfunctional thing that people need emotional support. It's not like some kind of a strange, odd thing that we need to like figure out how to wean the person off of it. We certainly want to do it in a boundary way. We want to do it in a way that's not harming ourselves, but we also want to do it in a compassionate way, in an empathetic way, in an understanding way, and not to ever think of it in a way of like this person is a nebuch and they never need. All of us need emotionally, all of us.
It's so beautiful the way you're putting it. I want to add one thing to this, but before I do, I want to just ask everybody, one of the things that we want to do for the last 5-6 minutes of this live is we want to talk about practical ways that help can be provided to single parent homes. And as Rabbi Drandolf and I mentioned at the beginning of the live, we're going to try to put together a PDF that we can share, out there of ideas, because people are asking, and particularly this, since there's just so much chaos right now, and so many single parents are quarantined and stuff of that sort, and there isn't enough of the inviting piece and stuff like that. What can be done? So if you are a single parent on here and something has been helpful to you, or if you've done something that's been appreciated by somebody else, or if you have an idea, start typing it in the comments, because we want to see those, and we want to see what we can learn from. And of course, we'll share some of the ideas that we've encountered, but I very much appreciate the value of the people who are listening. And I'm going to also put it on my stories afterwards and see if other people can come up with other ideas so that we can really create something wholesome for the community, who I have to say has been incredible and wants to do, and sometimes just needs to know, what can I actually do?
To
Back
add to that, I think that the questions that people ask tell a lot about where they're at in their minds.
Right.
And so when you hear the questions that we're getting, and some of the questions that I think are still yet to come, people want to know how to do it right. And I think that what I've seen, we were talking about the sensitivity and the way that you give, and we talk about our organizations, my extended family, and Shlomi's Club Links, that the way that we strive to give. And I've found, even more importantly, possibly, is that the community that gets involved with my extended family to help in all the different ways they do, the volunteers, that they're doing it that way as well. They have the exact same perspective, and I think people are really, really trying to give in that way. And that's really the most important thing, that the community have that awareness, because you're the people really. I mean, I'm in the trenches, but you're in the trenches in a completely different way, because you're there, you're the neighbor, you're the cousin, you're the aunt. And you have the ability to be there in such a powerful way. And if you have that perspective of trying to figure out what's the right thing, know which questions to ask, then it ups the level of everything. It ups the level of the giving that we're gonna be able to provide.
Right, right. No, that's an incredible perspective, and I think also one of the things that I find is that so often I'll have people who are extraordinary, and really maybe this could be one of the practical pieces. Sometimes people will say that, I think from me this person would feel uncomfortable getting it, but through the organization they'd feel comfortable. Like maybe I'm their
Sure.
landlord, so it would be weird for me, like it would come off in a way that's not. And that is one of the highest forms of chesed, because that means you're really caring about the person's dignity and how the person will feel about this gift, and you want to do it in a way that is sensitive and that is kind and that is reflective of the goodness that you want to do. So Rabbi Drangov, give me some things that you've seen people help families out and you're like, wow, that's a great idea and a great help.
Sure. Well, I think that when we talk about what you can do to help, first have to identify the needs. And I think that the greatest need that I've seen beyond money, the greatest need that I've seen specifically in this time during the coronavirus is schedule and stability within the family, the ability to give some kind of like semblance of normalcy to the daily grinds from morning wake up until bedtime, which all of us are struggling with right now. And to the extent that we can help our loved ones, our family members, whoever it is in our life that's a single parent who's really got it a lot harder even, give some kind of a structure. Maybe offer to do like a daily Zoom with a bunch of kids in the class, including, again, the more we can just not make it all about that single parent, but just make it an inclusive thing. I'm doing a Zoom for my son's class, and there's this one, and that's really my kavanah in all of it, is this one single parent, right? Because I know that she or he is really, really struggling to provide some kind of structure. So 30, 40 minutes, an hour a day, some kind of a fun activity or some kind of a Zoom session for the kids would be huge. One thing I found from a lot of the parents that have been in touch with me over the past couple of weeks is I don't know what to do with my kids. I have nothing for them to do all day. A whole day they're sitting and I have nothing for them to do. So if you can somehow provide something for kids to do that is really, really, that's positive, that's valuable, even if it's a chavrusa, some kind of a learning situation, anything like that you can give an enriching experience on a daily basis or even a weekly basis to whatever extent you can, the boundaries. No question.
And be consistent. Don't just say, well, today it works for me on a Tuesday morning. Well, the mom may have arranged something else or the father may have arranged something else. Whatever it is, make up a time or a thing that works with the parent, but then try to stick to it, barring extenuating circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a big one. And be mindful, be aware as you're going about your day. If you're, if you find a big sale, the other day there was a big sale on shoes. It was a tremendous sale online. And think about that person who might need it. I personally took the step of letting a lot of people know about this sale. There were shoes, like if people are struggling right now financially, there were like really, really great brand name shoes for boys and adults for like $20, $30. So I let people know about it, so be mindful of that stuff. And if you're going grocery shopping, be mindful. Not everybody can get out right now. Some people are quarantined. If you're going shopping, maybe there's somebody in your life that could use something. Like I think Ms. Cohn, you mentioned before, something along those lines, to be mindful of that as well, right? So if you're going shopping, maybe
so pick something up. Somebody wrote a couple comments here. I'm going to go to them in a second. I see Rabbi Drangov was not being heard here. The first half of the live is on my extended family's page. We are going to put it onto our YouTube channel as well, Mirz Hashem. There were a couple of other ideas. Somebody mentioned, I have a friend of mine who's amazing. She, during this coronavirus, actually called one of her friends who is a single parent and said, okay, you go away for an hour, leave the kids on the phone with me, and I'm reading stories. I don't know if she read it via FaceTime or live, but she kept the kids occupied for quite a bit. I think if we have any way, certainly now, of helping a family with anything physical needs, whether it's just errands, whether it's, again, being mindful of different things. We're having a little bit of a hard time now with koshering and turning over kitchens because people obviously don't want to go into other people's homes. But I had somebody actually who is in the medical profession and was able to get, for one reason or another, I don't remember who it was that he found, who was able to go in with medical clearance and able to help out a couple of the families. If there is any way that you can do that, I'm having people who are incredible, who are cooking now, for those who are sitting Shiva now, who are quarantined, and many of their extended families are. So if you have a neighbor or a friend who's sitting Shiva this week, it might be Kedai to call up and see who's taking care of meals and see if it's something. It's Erev Pesach. Not many are able to cook, and also a lot of people are just really not well. One of the things that's really challenging about this crisis is that people at the front lines, the helpers, so to speak, are also, many of them, not feeling well and not doing well. So it's really challenging because we're short on manpower. So I think that ability to help in that way is so, so, so helpful. And again, I think a lot of what we said in the first half of the live is so relevant and so true. We want to be respectful in whatever way that we do it, that it should be something that works for the family, that works for the individual. That's not something that we have any sort of gain out of, if I will, and that we don't create any sort of dependence because we need it, and we don't create any sort of conversation around whatever it is that we're doing that, oh, do you know I helped so and so? Because that's just hurtful long run. So it was really an amazing live. Like I said, the first half of it is on my extended families page for the next 24 hours. We are going to try to combine these two videos and upload them together to YouTube. It was so great to have all of you join us, and thank you so much for your sensitively asked questions and for your ideas. I'm going to put a question box in my stories. Encourage people to tell us ideas. We're going to try to put a PDF together of ideas of what people can do to help single parents during this difficult time. Have a great night.